Let's move to your thick Christianity and the Christianity you kind of like the most in America right now, kind of. And that is Mormonism, a church of LDS. What is it about that church that you think is more aligned with liberal democracy, which might come as a shock to some listeners?
It certainly came as a surprise to me.
Well, I don't think it's that big a surprise if you know a little bit about it and you know a little bit about the history of Mormonism, because their attachment to liberal democracy comes from a very specific and unique experience, really. For being...
Yes, an exilic experience, an experience of persecution. But that said, my first editor as a freelancer out of college was a lovely person named Deborah Lake, who wrote a scathing book about her abuse, the abuse she suffered within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some very dark things happened in that church. She subsequently killed herself. We saw that church mobilize for Proposition 8 in California, overturning our marriages. So it was not a given that the elements in their history would lead them toward the path that they're on now, which is, in the context of white conservative Christianity, a radically countercultural path. Very, very different from what white evangelical Protestants are doing. And that's part of what got my attention. So I'll just use a concept here that's central to the book, if I may.
Yes, please.
And that's the concept of a civic theology.
Say that again.
Just civic theology.
Civic theology.
Yeah. Had you run across this?
Yeah.
Do you have the term in Catholicism discipling or discipleship?
No. I mean, except not in the specific way the Mormons mean it. No.
Right. Well, how about spiritual formation?
Well, if you're a Jesuit, you definitely go through spiritual formation,
okay.
And you can have spiritual advisors. Okay. And
so these are things that I didn't know until becoming exposed to the world of Protestant churches. But they have this concept, spiritual formation, or synonymously discipling. And that's the process by which people make themselves over in the image of Jesus Christ, imitate Christ in a deep way, not just in word, but in deed, become like him. That's discipleship. And a light bulb went on for me when a Christian writer named John Ward recently became a Catholic.
He did?
Yeah, he converted.
Jesus, so to speak.
Yes, Jesus, so to speak.
I need to contact him. That's new.
Yeah, and he didn't publish it, but he wrote the most beautiful testimonial to why that happened and how it felt that I've ever read by anyone.
I need to get him back on the show.
Yeah.
He was here. I mean, he
had a book on the decline. It's called Testimony, and the
Yeah.
subtitle is something like The Betrayal of the
He's such a
Evangelical
good man.
Church. Yeah. So I heard him talk, and he said, our church, at that point he meant white evangelical, does a pretty decent job of discipling people in their own world of their family, their church, their community. You know, the idea is when Hurricane Helene comes, the churches are there. They're great. But he goes on to say, we have not done a good job of discipling people in their public lives, in their civic lives. How did they approach social media? How did they approach the United States government and politics? There's an enormous gap there in white Protestantism. Catholics do have doctrines about that, agree or disagree, but white Protestants really don't. And then I heard David French, who's white Protestant, of course, New York Times writer, say, it won't do to say, I may be a bit of an asshole on Twitter, but you should see me in the soup kitchen. Christians are not allowed to cabin off their engagement in the public world from their engagement with Christ in the private world. And it dawned on me that what's missing here at a deep level, the critique about Christianity is not, the important part is not they're getting into politics too much or whatever. The important part is that I think Jesus has something to say about how we should behave in public life, not just private life, how we should engage with each other.
Really? Where in the Gospels does he talk about that?
Well, those are the 3 points that I mentioned earlier about treating all those things.
That's not political.
No, it's not about what policies or politics you are. It's how you address others.
Well, that
Do you address people
but
with dignity, for example, on social media? When you're engaging in politics, do you talk about wanting to crush the other side? Do you say, as Donald Trump Jr. said, I understand the turn the other cheek stuff, but what has it gotten us? Nothing. So I looked around for Christians who were trying to figure out how to apply the teachings of Jesus in how they approach politics, not their endpoint, not their view on abortion or homosexuality, none of that. And it turns out that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is doing that work. They started it after the Proposition 8 campaign, which blew up in their face. They didn't like what they were doing. They
didn't like the reception.
They didn't like the reception, but they also kind of had what you all call a come to Jesus moment. Is this the role we want to play? So a couple years later, they helped put through an LGBT anti-discrimination statute in Salt Lake City. And then a few years after that, in 2015, came the Utah Compromise, in which the church worked very hard to pass successfully anti-discrimination protections for gay, lesbian, bigender, and transgender people, with religious exemptions that are very important to their church, all of which are reasonable. So, Brigham Young University does not have to put same-sex married couples in their married couple housing.